Hi, I'm Seb. It's 20 past 8 in the PM. So, I mean, maybe it's a bad idea to film now, but there's still natural light. So, I'm just gonna see, like, it seems okay at the moment. I mean, tune in if you want to see me regretting all my life choices by the end of the video, is I guess what I'm saying here. But anyway, I went to America, Los Estados Unidos, as they say. And yeah, that was exciting. Never been there before. I wanted to talk to you about the books that I read there and that I ended up buying there and acquiring there. So, to begin with, what did I bring? I brought two. I brought the third volume of the manga known in English as Delicious in Dungeon, or Dungeon Meshi in Japanese, which is just Dungeon Food, which is a much better title. And I brought this amazingly covered Who Killed Palomino Molero novel by Mario Vargas Llosa, the Peruvian Nobel Prize winner and failed presidential candidate, and now kind of grumbly anti-liberal guy who writes for El País in Spain. There he is there. The back of the book is just as good as the front of the book, because look at that toothy smile. But yeah, I just in my last video I was talking about authors' faces on covers. This is the back cover though, so I think it's okay. I mean, if I was a writer, I still wouldn't be okay with that. But yeah, this is a detective novel, kind of like, yeah, it's kind of pulpy detective novel. And the main thing that is interesting about it and exciting about it is that it's set in Peru in, I think, the 1950s. And that really kind of sets the tone and makes it, I don't know, interesting. Because reading this, I kind of realized that I'm not really interested in detective fiction at all. Like, I can't remember really enjoying detective stuff since I read, I don't know, Sherlock Holmes and some Edgar Allan Poe when I was a kid, you know? So yeah, maybe it's just not a genre for me, but I'm enjoying this a lot because of the setting in Peru. Like there's a murder and it's in a small, I was gonna say one horse town, but it's actually a one car town. There's like one taxi driver and the police officers have to use that taxi driver to get around from place to place, which is kind of like takes up a lot of time in the plot, which sounds like it could be bothersome, but it makes sense because that's what the police have to spend their time doing, making sure they can get the car so they can drive around. So that's just interesting, I think. And the dynamic between the characters is interesting. They're not very likable people at all, but also the town is in a valley, and on one side, on the top of the other, one side of the mountain, like up high on one side is the American company kind of enclosure where all the gringos or white people are, and they have like kind of fancy houses, and it's nice, and they work for a company who is, what are they doing? They're extracting some resource, the normal thing that Americans do in Latin America, right? And then, if not like instigating right-wing coups or something like that. And then on the other side of the valley at the top is the air base, for the Peruvian government. And it's interesting because at the moment there's like the police are having a lot of trouble like proceeding with their investigation because of like problems like not being able to get answers from the airbase and having to answer to the airbase. So this connection between the military and then foreign kind of company and then the local police trying to do their job, of like surrounding a horrific murder, is really interesting. It's a great dynamic. You might have noticed I said like I mentioned that I'm still reading it. I think I used like the present continuous there. So yeah, I'm still like enjoying it, but I was enjoying it very much on the way there. It reminds me of, what's it called? The one I read recently, The City and the City by China Mieville, which is almost science fiction, but it's not. It's kind of like this, I guess, political detective novel where it's like, it's not really political, but it's like there's one city and it's built on top of another city, and the people in both cities aren't allowed to see each other. And then there's a murder, and the difficult thing for the detectives is navigating between the two cities. It feels like sci-fi, but it's actually more just like a social political situation, and that's really interesting. So detective novel, really boring story and boring characters, I thought, but the setting was incredible, so worth a read. And so far this is proving kind of similar, although I guess you'd call it historical fiction. Next up is Dungeon Meshi. So I read this, like I finished this very quickly in America. This is the story of a group of adventurers in a Dungeons and Dragons kind of fantasy world where they have to eat animals. They have to eat the dungeon monsters because they're poor. And that's just a relatable story, I guess, on some level. It feels, yeah, like weirdly relatable. Not that I eat like just things I found on the street or dangerous animals like coyotes and things like that around here. But yeah, like I don't know, the characters are amazing. I'm loving the series so much. I even named my pet rabbit on the bookshelf over there after one of the characters in this, Marcel, who is maybe my favorite. Then the first place I went to in America was Seattle. I took the bus to Seattle, and the first place that, well, one of the first places that I went to after getting off the bus was a bookshop called Arundel Books. But before that, I went into this store, Kinokuniya, which was very exciting because I don't think I've ever seen one outside of Japan. I've only taken a few steps in Seattle, and already I'm feeling really warmed up to this city because it's reintroduced me to this old friend. And then inside the shop, it gets even better because I found they have a whole display just for Dungeon Meshi with like posters and little like cutouts that the staff have done. And I found out afterwards that it's because of the release of the last volume. So the series has officially finished. It's been all written out in Japanese. So yeah, thrilling experience for a nerd like me. And like obviously I've already starting to fall in love with Seattle at this point by virtue of this little display alone. But yeah, this was just a cheeky insert from the future. So I will go back to the actual video now. I'm pretty sure it's called Arundel Books. And there were two books there. Well, first of all, it was an amazing bookshop. It was just beautiful. If I have like pictures of it, I'll put them here. But there were two books there which really caught my eye. So much so that I thought I might buy them because they were by a local press. And I decided not to buy them because I thought I'm not going to buy the first thing I see in America. Come on, like I'm going to at least look around a bit before buying them. But after looking around a bunch of bookshops in Seattle, that's like one of the main things I did in Seattle, and I was only there 2 days. And by the way, Seattle is just amazing. I loved Seattle. It was so good. It was like one of my favorite cities like ever, maybe. I just really want to go back there, and felt like it would be better to live there though than maybe visit for a long time because I felt like 2 days was good. But yeah, I fell in love with Seattle, and I really didn't expect to. I thought it'd just be a nice little stop off and like kind of similar to Vancouver, but it's not similar to Vancouver. Anyway, my point is that I saw lots of bookshops and I couldn't find these two books, and these two books were the ones that I wanted. So on the last day, I went back to Arundel Books and I bought the two books, which are Beyond by Horacio Quiroga, the Uruguayan writer, and this is called Anecdotes, which is actually by my favorite German writer, Heinrich von Kleist, who I talked about a lot in my last video. And it's funny because just before I went to America, I had this kind of amazing experience where I found a whole bunch of translated Kleist, which I didn't know even existed, in my local library. So that's just waiting for me to read. And then I found this. And these two books are a local publisher, like a Seattle-based publisher. So I figured that if they're not published anywhere else. They're not being translated anywhere else, right? As far as I can see, these are the only places you can get these translations, one from the Spanish, one from the German. And yeah, in that case, if I wanted to read these translations, I'd have to order them from Seattle, in which case it doesn't make sense. I might as well buy them in Seattle, especially because they're so light. So that was very exciting. Also, it's nice to have a kind of connection to the city. It's sort of personal, like a very local publisher thing. But yeah, what's the publisher called? I should probably say that since a nice bookmark. I didn't even notice that. A book is a dream you hold in your hands. Thank you, Neil Gaiman. But the publisher is Sublunary Editions, Seattle, Washington. So thank you, Sublunary Editions. I really like your books and your covers. This one called Anecdotes is just anecdotes. So I didn't understand this at first. I had to read quite a bit of the introduction to get what this was. It is, before Kleist died, before he went on a picnic and committed suicide, he wrote he published. Yeah, I think he published this kind of tabloid. Yeah, I guess that's what you call it, a tabloid, which had news, but it also had little entertaining pieces in it. like kind of scandalous news, and apparently it was quite successful at first. But to kind of pad it out, he would write little anecdotes, and the anecdotes were sometimes, based on fact, sometimes I think totally fiction, but it was his work. And and I read just the first few, and they're really good, and you can tell they're him. So they're like kind of micro fictions or flash fictions. I don't know what you call them, but they're very short, like 1 page, 2 page, 1 paragraph, something like that, right? Like what's that? It says anecdote baaaack, right? So some of them are like jokes as well. The first like kind of jokes, but in him it feels very Kleist, and I love this guy. So it feels like, when you love an author so much, you feel like you know them. Actually, who was it I read recently? Werner Herzog quoted somewhere saying that when he read Kleist, he felt like he'd found a brother. I don't know if I'd go that far, but I feel like I found something in Kleist, which I nearly said in Christ. Oh my goodness, that would have been quite different. But yeah, that L and R, So those are the anecdotes, which I'm very excited to read and very excited to own, because I rarely buy books. And this is the other book I bought in Seattle, Beyond, which is translations of Quiroga. He writes lots of kind of jungle, like he's like Edgar Allan Poe in the jungle is how I've heard him described, and I think I thought that in my head before I heard him describe that, because it fits so well. It's the little I've read by him has been in Spanish, and I've only read like some internet translated things of the Spanish ones into English to get a better idea of what was going on, because my Spanish is not that good. But yeah, I really like the stories that I've read before, and this is also kind of for my father. I think I'm going to read this and then give it to my father, because my father is really into this guy too. So those are 2 there. And then I went to San Francisco to stay with my cousin. And in San Francisco, I went to a famous bookshop, and it's called City Lights Books. It's where Howl was published by Allen Ginsberg, and they have Howl everywhere, and because that was like a big deal. Like I think there was like a big court case against that, and like freedom of speech and all that stuff, right? And it's the edition of Howl that they sell is the same one that I had to read for university, which was sort of cool. Because I quite like the poem, I guess, although I don't remember much of it now. In fact, I wouldn't say I loved it. I think I quite liked it, especially bits of it. But, especially with some long poems, it's like that. And especially with like beat poetry, I feel. But anyway, beat generation stuff, lots of that was going on there. But one of the most interesting things for me was that when I looked at the things they published, I saw this book, Spinoza by Gilles Deleuze, Practical Philosophy. And it's a philosophy book, but I didn't buy it. I own it. I already own it, and I brought it to Canada with me, so it's here on my shelf. I just haven't read it yet. I didn't realize that it was when I got it, I was in the UK, and it's City Lights Books. It's a City Lights books book. It's a City Lights Books book. So that's cool. I didn't realize that this kind of interesting, small but really famous bookshop with all this history behind it was the one who published this book. I just got this because I wanted to read it, and this is the only translation of it. I really like now knowing the bookshop that published this book, right? Like I feel like I have a better connection to it. And then the last book related to my big America trip was this one, A Shining, by John Fosse. Another Nobel Prize winner, I think Kleist should have been a Nobel Prize winner, and Ryoko Kui, who wrote Dungeon Meshi, they should also be Nobel Prize winners, because their work is amazing. A Shining, my cousin passed this on to me when I stayed with him in San Francisco. We took the train from Seattle down to San Francisco, by the way, I should have mentioned. That was cool. The scenery really through most of Washington was quite dull, and the weather wasn't great, but things really started to pick up about halfway through Oregon. My cousin and I just had this great conversation when we were talking about literature and stuff, and he mentioned this one, and the writing style in this is amazing. I'll just start reading from the beginning to give you an idea. I was taking a drive. It was nice. It felt good to be moving. I didn't know where I was going. I was just driving. Boredom had taken hold of me. Usually I was never bored, but now I had fallen prey to it. I couldn't think of anything I wanted to do, so I just did something. I got in my car and drove, and when I got somewhere I could turn right or left, I turned right, and at the next place I could turn right or left, I turned left, and so on. I kept driving like that. Eventually I'd driven a long way, and it just goes on, and look at that huge block of text. So it's very repetitive, but it's kind of, the style is the most amazing thing, the way he introduces new bits of information at exactly the right moment to make it fast paced. This is a fast paced, really slim book, and it's like one of the reasons why it took me a bit long actually is just because I've realized that sometimes when I'm reading, my eyes flit away from the page, and if I did that in this book, I wouldn't know where I was, because in the block of text, so much of it is kind of similar on one page. It's almost like chanting or like a sutra or something like that. But also there is a plot. In fact, the one thing I didn't like about it was that I think it got a bit too plotty at the end. But it's about a guy, and like he decides suddenly to just go driving, and then his car gets stuck in the woods, and so then he's just walking in the woods, and he doesn't know where to go or what to do because he's in the middle of nowhere, and it's snowing. So there's a kind of sense of urgency, even though he seems kind of chill about everything, and often like we're getting kind of insights into his head and how he got into this place. But it's a sort of like absurdist element to it. Not absurdist as in like absurd things happen, but absurdist as in like, what's the point in anything? Like, I'm just doing this. I could go left, I could go right, I'll go right. Next time I'll go left. It's like there's a sort of meaninglessness to everything, but it's it's compelling. And like, the main thing was the style. The style was absolutely amazing in this. I read it pretty quickly, and that was a great book, and I'm really happy to have it now, and I'll have to give something to my cousin if he comes to visit up here in Vancouver. But yeah, let me know down in the comments if you're interested in any of these books, or if you've read any of these, or I don't know, have you been to America? Are you an American? Do these places have meaning for you that I talked about? I only went to Seattle and San Francisco. I originally wanted to do a big kind of train trip and stop off at Portland as well, going along the, what's it called, the West Coast, but I didn't do that in the end because I don't have much money, and it costs a lot of money to travel and stay places. But now I'm back home in Vancouver. I'll catch you in my next video. Bye bye.